Welcome to the PRsonal Podcast. In this episode, I'm excited to speak to Zara King. Zara is a product designer and owner of Zara King Designs. As always, I'm Charlotte Nichols from Harvey and Hugo, so let's start the podcast. Zara, tell me why you think it's important that we talk about death.
I think because it happens to everyone. It is the only thing in life that is completely unavoidable, really. Death and taxes, apart from that. But I think we kind of naturally, you want to shy away from talking about death because it's awful, and why would you want to talk about it? But I think so many people get blindsided by it, that you're just not prepared. And I think that there's obviously the grief and the sadness of death, but I think all the other things, the business of death, is so complicated and so scary and so unknown to people that kind of overwhelms the grief, and that you can kind of, people don't get chance to grieve because they're so busy dealing with what comes after when someone dies. And I think it's really important that there's so much better education about what people want when they die, how you want to be treated, because how I want to be treated might be completely different from everyone in the world, but it's my choice and it's what I want. So I think being prepared for death is really important, and also being prepared for what happens after death is really important for people to know.
Absolutely, because like you say, it happens to everyone, but it's a topic that, even people, they just avoid talking about with their families. You've just mentioned that death, I've never really thought of it that way, but you're right, it is a very personal thing. But people won't talk about it. They won't tell people what they want or how they want it to happen. I guess it's maybe that fear of if they talk about it, it might actually happen sooner, maybe.
Yeah. Don't bring it to your door.
Yes, absolutely. Tempting fate.
Yeah, which is completely understandable. But we need to know.
Which is interesting, actually. Just thinking about it, I got targeted by this social media. It was targeted on Instagram adverts by a company that was all about preparing for death. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, and it's true. I didn't dare click on it, but it was all about having all your files organised in a place where everyone could find it. I don't know why it was targeting me, but I guess it's important, or maybe it's targeting people who have parents still alive. I don't know. So there are companies out there that are starting to hopefully educate and bridge that gap.
Hopefully, yeah. And I think a lot of people kind of think, oh, I'm getting these targeted ads because maybe I'm getting old. So then it's maybe your vanity or your whatever. You kind of don't want to look at that because I'm nowhere near death, but you could drop down dead right now from something completely unknown. It's not about age, it's about life. So people kind of should stop.
Yes, and we did this stoic exercise once with David Harper where he was just like, imagine you're dead, like the world still is going on, and it was very empowering actually to almost think of you that way, because it's like, well, goodness me, like I could be dead, so let's think about all the things that I can do. So you're right. I think if you think about it more, and it sounds, when you talk about all the admin involved, it sounds like you've been through it as a personal experience.
Yeah, so kind of witnessed it, but my dad died when I was 16, and kind of through a series of unfortunate circumstances, I was kind of the only person left in his life, and some of those kind of decisions almost fell on me. I was very protected by my mum and my stepdad. They made a lot of hard decisions for me, but it was still very complicated. Like, what happens to his car? What happens to the dog? What happens to all these different things that his possessions that kind of just end up? You can't take a whole person's house into your house, so where did it all go? And then funeral arrangements, who pays for it? That's obviously a huge topic for people, and can cause lifelong family fallouts. And it really shouldn't.
And you dealt with all that at 16?
Yeah.
On top of your grief?
Yes. Yeah.
My goodness. So no wonder you want to educate people about it.
Yeah.
And had you had any other experience of death up to that point?
So really the only close kind of family experience I had was tragically when I was about 9 or 10, a close family friend died, and he was the same age as me.
Okay.
And he was just absolutely fine one day, riding his bike, had a bit of a headache, and he suffered a catastrophic brain hemorrhage. And it was just, I think as a child, it was like my friend was there, and it was just someone who I saw every now and again, and we all got on, and then he wasn't there anymore. And it took probably a long time to realise what that was. His family went straight into raising money and charity and stuff like that, so it became a much bigger thing. And I think looking back at it now, it was probably it was obviously an extremely tragic experience for everyone involved, but it was beautiful to watch what the family did with that grief, and that yes, we can grieve, and yes, it's this awful thing that happened, but the amazing work that they did with it. And I was part of that, and we did charity events and fun walks and all sorts of things, wearing this T-shirt, and it was kind of like a look how powerful someone's death can be.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
it wasn't this looming negative thing that nobody talks about. It was really, I can't say it was healthy, because who knows what healthy is when it comes to death, but for me it felt as a child healthy and safe and special.
Yeah.
That they've really like protected his memory and done something good with it. So that was kind of my first experience of death, but that was kind of with like a step away from the family. But my dad dying was the first, like, the biggest death, and probably will be one of the biggest deaths in my life. It happened the week before I started college.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just, it was just the most bizarre time. When I look back on it now, I am really proud of how I dealt with it. Like, I just kind of, this is what, and I'm like that with everything now. I'm very pragmatic, and it's just kind of, right, let's deal with it. And in about 5 years' time, I'll probably go, oh God, what happened? But yeah.
Where do you even start to deal with something like that, age 16?
I don't know. It's a really strange one, because I think my dad was a very complicated person, and through kind of his life, it was his business, but he'd kind of push people away, or bad things had happened, and it was kind of just me and him at the end. And it was just kind of, I think he knew for a long time that he was going to die young, because he used to talk about it a lot.
Okay, interesting. You often hear that.
Yeah, and he'd always say like, oh, we'll go on this holiday because I might be dead in 10 years' time.
Okay.
And it was almost like he was predicting his kind of downfall. But he had a very complicated relationship with alcohol, and he probably knew that was why. It was from a lot of health problems in his past and things like that, so there was kind of a knock-on effect with it. But yeah, it was kind of always, it probably has been mentally preparing me without realising that it was going to happen young.
Do you think it helped?
Maybe in like a, I told you so kind of way, like, oh, you were right. But I don't know. I can't. I don't think anything can prepare you for that. But it probably is now thinking about it. Maybe, yeah. But at the time, I didn't go, oh, thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
You warned me about this. But yeah.
Oh, definitely. And you mentioned you had a complicated relationship with your dad, but you also cared for him.
Yeah, so in not in the normal sense of I was classed as a child carer or anything like that. I think I kind of cared for his lifestyle and helped cover up a lot of what was going on with him from my mum and my stepdad a lot. I think I probably protected him and myself from them being any bother. That's kind of, I used to worry a lot, child. Like that was kind of my like go-to emotion was worry and how can I fix it?
Yeah.
And by fixing it, I'll say everything's fine and you don't need to worry about it. And yep, no, we're all great in our other part of the world and don't bother us. And through that, there was probably a lot of adult things that I had to do that at the time I didn't realise were things I shouldn't be doing.
Just your normal childhood.
Just my normal childhood, and just kind of get on with it, and we'll see where we end up. But towards the end, he had gone very downhill, and I was kind of doing everything I could to keep the wheels turning. And then the wheels fell off one day when I'd helped get him out of bed, and he couldn't get any further, and he was at the top of the stairs and he just fell down the entire flight of stairs. And he was very, I don't know what the word would be for it, stubborn man. And it took him a long time to let me phone an ambulance. And I was completely on my own, and it kind of took ages, and they finally turned up. And because I'm cursed with being 6 foot tall since the age of about 13, everyone thinks that has always thought I was an adult, even when I was young. So I think when the ambulance turned up, they thought I was much older than I was.
How old were you?
So I was 16.
16.
So
right,
yeah.
Okay.
So this is about 8 weeks before he died.
Oh, okay, right.
They turned up, and there was no kind of comfort or protection from the ambulance. And I can see why, because they thought I was 25 or 30. But even then, actually, in thinking about it, you're going through something quite scary. Be a bit nicer.
Yeah.
I was probably just unlucky with the ambulance driver. But anyway, got him to hospital, didn't know what hospital I was in. I was just kind of there. Luckily, it was just like mobile phones. Everyone had one time. So I'd remembered to take it with me. But I got to the hospital and there was no come to here or do this. I was just in the waiting room. Didn't know where I was. I remember having to ask someone who was another like member of the public what hospital we were in. Braced myself to ring my mum and say, can you come to the hospital? This is all going on. And oh yeah, by the way, it's been really bad for a really long time. So she turned up and was great. And I think she was in shock of what was going on. And then kind of had the doctors finally came, had the discussion, and they had to ask all the questions because they could clearly see straight away that he wasn't looking after himself.
Okay.
And then it all came out. My mum sat there and listened to me saying, he does this, he drinks this is how much. And she was just kind of like, oh my God. And I think she was also kind of shocked that I could talk to the doctors so well. It was just kind of, yep, this is what's happening, and here we go.
You.
And then he was in and out. He was in hospital for a long time, and I was going to see him every day and look after the dog in the house. And then one day he just discharged himself. And I think that was kind of my final straw. I just kind of, we've done all this to try and help you, and then you've just done one. I was really like mad at him, so I didn't talk to him. And then a few weeks later, there was a knock at the door, and I was like, oh, it's going to be him. It was the police. And the police basically said, he's been taken back into hospital, and it's probably maybe 24 hours if you want to see him. And at the time, I felt really guilty about it, but actually I'm really glad I didn't. And I said, no, I don't want to, because I think part of me didn't believe that it was the end, and it was just kind of like he always gets better and it'll be fine.
Yeah,
but
because you'd seen that.
Yeah. But he didn't. And then I remember my mum had gone to work and I was home alone, and she came home in the middle of the day, and I was just like, I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So she came home, really kindly, lovely, and kind of explained what was going on. She didn't hide anything from me, but she said, like, this is the end. But because I was kind of, and I don't think it was from like a legal standpoint, but I was his last person, they were said, we need to make the decision to turn his machines off. And so I decided that I thought that was the best thing, because I'd seen him suffer. It had all been explained to me that he wasn't going to get better. So we made that decision, made the phone call, and by the time we'd made the decision and the phone call, he'd already gone.
Okay.
So, in a way, that was better, because it was like I knew it was validation that I'd made the right decision.
Yes, absolutely. But what a choice to give to a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah. And then a week later, I started college, and in the middle of my first week of college, it was his funeral. And I had to go and ask college if I could have the day off. And they were like, what for? And I was like, it's my dad's funeral. And they were just like, come into our office. We need to talk to you. So, yeah, it was...
Goodness,
crazy.
A really difficult time. And obviously it's changed the way you see death, and you want to help educate others. And you've gone a step further to educate people about death through your book.
Absolutely, yeah. The Lovely Life of Being. It's my proper little passion project. And when I'm not doing all the other things, it's something that I really want to sit down and properly give the time that it needs. It kind of came about through a bizarre set of circumstances. When I was at university, one of our projects was to design something for the future. And it was to fix a problem that's happening now, but you get given a time frame. And it was like, mine was 20 years' time. So to make life really easy for myself, I picked euthanasia, even though that wasn't one of the selection. I was just like, how can we make this really hard? And everyone thought I was going to make some sort of death machine or something that would help euthanasia itself.
Mm-hmm.
But after kind of going through it all and the design process of it, I was like, actually, it's education for euthanasia or assisted dying. Mm-hmm. People don't know enough. They don't talk about it enough, and it's not covered in early life. There will be lots of books out there, but there's a lot of books on what happens after death, and the grief, and grandma's gone to heaven now, how can we fix it? And all those books are so valuable and so important. But there's not much out there to naturally prepare a child for the end of a life without it being grandma's gone to heaven.
Yes.
So The Lovely Life of Being, without going too much into the book itself, because one day I want to get it out there. But
just a teaser.
Yeah, it's based on a dog. So it's instantly... I've already
bought it.
Yeah, it's instantly a millionaire. And yes, the start of the book is... because it was in the future, it was kind of based on future technologies as well. So it needs to be adjusted for now.
Right.
But actually, it'll be clawing up to that future very
absolutely.
Soon. So it's meant to be very interactive. So you start your life with Bean as a baby pup, and you turn his life light on and he glows. And that's kind of a signal, and he's an alive, he's a sentient being. And you grow up with Bean, and he goes through all the different life journeys. He gets a family who also have life lights. And then towards the end of his life, he starts to get sick, and you make the decision to turn his life light off. And when that happens, you can't turn it back on. But then the final page of the book is a picture of Bean with seed embedded paper, and you plant the paper, and then Bean kind of grows in your garden as his life goes on in different ways, and you can tend to that plant and stuff like that. There's a lot of logistics about the technology around it, but it can be done. I have a good prototype of it that kind of puts the point. But
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm fighting back the tears there, because obviously I lost Hugo, and it's all important for children to know, because my daughters, particularly my eldest, wanted to know how he died, and it is often euthanasia for animals, and it's hard for them to get their head around that. And, you know, of course, if you're writing for children now, in the future, euthanasia might well be the way for assisted dying, something that we all accept. What are your thoughts around it?
I think that animals are given a lot more respect and dignity than humans.
Agree.
I think animals get to die with no suffering, probably sometimes too early. But that's people's decision to make. And I think it's really unfortunate that there's so much taboo and so much difficulty around assisted dying now. There are parts of the world where it's obviously much easier, and we've just passed a new bill in England to kind of make steps forward for that. So hopefully it is coming. But I think you choose, when you get up in the morning, you choose what you do for a living, you choose what you eat, you choose who your partner is, you choose when you want to have kids, you choose every single part of your life, and you can't choose how you leave without potentially getting someone arrested or ruining a different life, or someone having to find your body in the most disgusting way. It's insane that there isn't more out there. You should get to choose how you live. And yes, there should absolutely be laws and rules and tests and everything that you could imagine to safeguard that it's not used in the wrong way.
Yes.
But we all deserve to die in dignity. And there's so many cruel diseases now that rob people of that. Why not do more?
Absolutely. Like you say, you wouldn't do it to an animal, would you? They've got a lot more respect.
Absolutely.
So hopefully there'll be positive changes around that in the future. But amazing about your book. I'll keep a lookout for it. So what do you believe happens when you die?
I believe that when you die, you leave a legacy. You leave some sort of memory with someone. You leave grief. But I think when you're gone, you're gone.
Okay.
I respect everyone's beliefs, and I think it would be, for me, I kind of wish I did believe other things, because I think they're so nice and poetic, and it's such a healthy way. Other religions or cultures have such amazing thoughts around death, and it's so much healthier. But for me, I kind of think it's like turning off a computer or turning the power off to your house, and that's it. But I do think you don't die in the memories of your loved ones and all the people who hate you.
Yeah, true.
Thank God.
Not the nicest of thoughts, but at least I'll be alive and the people who hate me's mind.
But it's true. You leave... Whoever you are, you leave some sort of mark on the world.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it before on this podcast, but apparently you only truly die when the last person ever mentions your name, or I suppose thinks of you.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And yeah, you know, I believe other things, but I think sometimes that's maybe to give me comfort. You know, if you look at the biological, you know, facts about it, I suppose it's a transference of energy, however you look at it, whether you know, when you talk about the Life of Bean book and planting the back page or the seeds, you know, we're all kind of transforming our energy into, even if it's just the soil or, you know, carbon. But interesting. I always like to hear that perspective from people, and especially as we've been talking about death. So thanks for sharing with that. Another thing just to kind of touch on before we round up kind of the family life side of things. Your parents divorced when you were 5. How did that impact you?
I think in thinking about it now, it is the best thing that could have happened.
Okay.
It's my parents' story to tell, so that's their business. But I think my mum deciding to leave my dad, getting her own home, becoming a single parent, getting a job, and then eventually meeting my stepdad is probably the greatest gift that she could have ever done for me. All very, very complicated, but...
It always is, isn't it?
Obviously. But I think even on looking back over the past few years, I've been able to see how strong she was to protect us, to protect herself, and to build this incredible life for herself that she has now. It's very inspirational. And then I think teething problems at the beginning, but my stepdad coming into our life was just, it's changed our lives in more ways than I can imagine. He walked me down the aisle a couple of years ago and got married, and I couldn't have wanted anything better. So the divorce was it was handled very well. I remember my dad sitting us down and saying the judge was really impressed with how well we communicated with each other and the shared custody and all that, and kind of they did work it out well. There is the to and the fro and the passing messages on and things like that, but that's human nature and that's what's going to happen, added to my worry nature, but so much better than if they'd stayed together. I don't even want to imagine what my life would have been like if they'd stayed together. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's just quite an interesting perspective. We talk about, divorce, marriage, that sort of thing comes up quite a lot on the podcast, but we rarely hear it from a child's point of view, from back in their memories.
Yeah.
And also it's lovely to hear a positive spin on that as well, particularly given my personal situation.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, and well done to your mother.
Stories are at the heart of the Personal Podcast, and we're so grateful for everyone who comes on and shares them. Stories are also at the heart of a strong PR campaign. And at Harvey and Hugo, we believe that everyone's story deserves a chance to be heard. That's why we're on a mission to give you a voice amplified through the power of story. Our stories are shared in the form of press releases, social media, content marketing, videography, photography, animation, graphic design, and podcasting. Our stories aren't just heard, they're shared, watched, clicked, but most importantly, they are felt. It's this stirring of emotions that cuts through the noise to light fires within people and activate them towards your purpose. So one question for you. Are you ready to share your story? Harvey and Hugo, your voice amplified.
Okay, so we're changing the subject a little bit. You run a product design business, and one of the products that you've designed is an up-to-date bedpan.
Yes.
What draws you to kind of get involved in redesigning these products that you call fixing the forgotten?
Yeah. So Zara King Designs is the first female-owned product design company in Teesside, which spurs me on massively.
Good for you.
Thank you. They are, from what I can see, very hard to find. Only about 10 in the world, which is depressing.
Really?
Yeah. Only about 6% of product designers are female, which explains why nothing fits.
Totally.
The world is not meant for women.
Goodness, I never knew that stat. That does explain a lot.
It does, yeah. And that's not to say that men can't design for women. Men absolutely can design for women. But women can design for men, and people of any gender and any body size, shape, type, anything. Pets and animals, you can design it all. But there's not enough. It's not equal to the world that we live in.
No.
So it's really important to me that it's kind of, product design became a massive quick career shift. I was a teaching assistant for a very long time.
Okay.
Loved it, but went as far as I could with it. Handed my notice in March, or just before March 2020. Perfect timing.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
But it turns out it was, because I got the summer off and then I went to Teesside Uni to do product design. Not look back. Absolutely loved it. And throughout my time there, kind of the biggest thing I did was design the bedpan, and that's kind of still going on. It's going forward. But from that came kind of this idea of the wealth of information that comes from something horrible is unbelievable. Okay. So the world doesn't need more iPhones. The world doesn't need more, I don't know, versions of the newest football. Like, we're pretty good with the football that we have. We should be putting more energy into the problems that people are facing every day.
Makes sense.
So if I said to someone, oh, what's wrong with this football? They might say, oh, it doesn't go fast enough. And that's like a few days worth of, it's probably not, it's millions of hours worth of work for millions of pounds. But if I said if I said to someone, why does your hand shake when you're doing this thing? I can really dig into that and say, like, how can we help? Because I bet you're not the only one. And then for the bedpan, I call it, I opened a Pandora's box of pain and suffering. And it was originally a problem for my wife. And I thought, because she's a nurse, sorry.
Oh, okay.
She was training during COVID, and we thought that was going to be the hardest part. It wasn't. It was bedpans. She would come home every day saying this is the situation that's happening. It's horrific. What's going on? And then through like Kismet, whatever you want to call it, the opportunity to design something for healthcare came up through university, and I knew that I wanted to make a new kind of bedpan. I had it in my head for a while, and then we went with it. But you have to prove that it's a problem.
Okay.
And yes, it was a problem for her, but is it a problem for everyone else? So you start your surveys, you start asking people around it, and not a day goes by where I'm not finding more and more horrific stories, waste, like just the awful things that go with it. So we started with the bedpan, and then it was kind of, well, what else is out there? What other problems are out there that people are just not fixing? Because a lot of time in healthcare, they're all so amazing that they just get on with it and they don't complain, and it doesn't get seen by the people who hold the purse strings or can make the changes. So nothing gets done about it. So I'm really about kind of asking those questions. People are starting to find me now for things as well, because it's kind of, it is more niche.
Yes.
I'm not about making grey metal black shiny things that like men find really cool.
Which is probably perceived as more glamorous.
And much more masculine as well. And I kind of finding that balance between being a female designer but also wanting to cater to everyone. It's quite difficult.
Because that was going to be one of my questions, what's it like in such a male-dominated environment? But I guess you think about things differently, having a female brain, different hormones going through your body, and then you do naturally, potentially, well, as women, we have a more caring side to ourselves. We want to help people. I'm not saying that men don't either, but it has been proven that we're always thinking of others. So, that's so interesting. Are there any other products that you're thinking of revamping, or is it top secret?
There's a couple of things that are top secret. I have... I'm working for a few clients now, doing kind of a little bit of a redesign for a project for an excellent project that I really hope takes off. It's a board game for blind people.
Oh, yes.
I can't talk about what it is because it's not my project.
Okay, no problem. Watch this space.
Yeah, and some other cool little bits and things, but it is hard because you can't just be like, this, look at my thing. Like, you have to be really careful. But
you have to really protect what you create.
I'm going through the IP process at the moment, and it's a bit of a minefield.
Oh, goodness, it sounds brutal.
Yeah, but amazing and exciting, and I'm learning so much from it. But yeah, there's some really like interesting stuff, and I think that's the thing as well. I need to make it interesting for myself and feel like I'm making a difference. You can't avoid plastic. Plastic is incredible, but I don't want to just look back on my life and I've polluted the ocean with a million bits of plastic that didn't help anyone. So I want to kind of, I'm not saying anything I make will be successful. I'm not saying it will change the world, but if it did, that would be like I'd be so proud that I could have like helped at least one person go to the toilet in their own bed without spilling on themselves. You've made that one person's day better. That
makes such a difference. Well, I have every faith in you, and good luck with the products that you're creating. Thank you. You are doing really well. I've heard you've just got some more funding, so that's all brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. We mentioned about the board game. you've also had problems with your eyesight over the years. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so it turns out that I have some sort of like genetic squiffiness.
Technical term.
Technical term. It's too complicated to explain it.
I'm good with squiffiness.
Squiffiness that makes my muscles weaker around, specifically around my eye lens.
Okay.
So a good few years ago now, I was kind of I have terrible vision. I'm like minus 12 or something in this eye, but this is my good eye.
Oh my goodness.
Everyone always says, which one's your good eye? And this eye was minus like 29, so it was never used apart from peripheral vision. So I never kind of paid much attention to it. And I'd started seeing this like curve of a shadow, and I just ignored it for too long. And then I went to my opticians, and I'd mentioned about it, so they had a really good look at it, and they were like, yeah, you need to go to A&E right now. You need to go to the Sunderland Eye Infirmary now. He's a note. And I had a detached lens, but it had been like that probably for at least 2 years.
That's really serious, isn't it?
Yeah. So kind of investigating it, it's very unusual to happen, especially in my age.
Yeah.
So they had to remove the lens and put a plastic one in.
Oh my goodness.
And there was kind of you potentially might be able to get like 20/20 vision in that eye. So it was really scary and really exciting.
So it could have improved it
Absolutely,
or lost your vision altogether.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had the surgery, they put it in, and it was just really blurry but clearer than it had been.
Okay.
So now when I take my glasses off, I swap eyes. So now I use this eye and not this eye. I still can't walk out of the bedroom with my glasses off. Like, I would kill someone if I was driving a car. But
Yeah.
they did it, but when they did it, they had to attach it to different muscles. And it's on a slight wonk. So when the light hits it from the side, another technical term, I am a scientist. When the light hits it from the side, I see like rainbows, which sounds like, isn't that fun? And
Sounds very Disney.
Yeah, it's not. There's no birds flying on my hand.
Oh, bless you.
Quite
distracting, although beautiful.
Yes, yeah. And it's took a good few years for it to kind of die down a little bit. It still happens, but my brain's kind of shut off from it. But when they did the surgery, because I'd never ever used that eye, my brain won't accept the new lens. So when an optician looks at this lens, they go, you've got 20/20 vision. Your lens, like, they do all the tests and they say it's 20/20. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, but no, because my brain doesn't say that. So it's all about your brain rather than your eye.
Yes, I've heard that. You see, with your brain. How interesting. Because I've heard that people who've suddenly regained their vision, you think they have this miraculous surgery, they like skip out of hospital, but no, they have to almost learn things like a baby would, because they just like, well, what is this?
Yeah, absolutely. And my other eye's doing the same thing.
Oh.
So it's kind of, it's a little bit of a ticking time bomb, but at the moment everything's okay. So they're not going to do the surgery until the hand's forced with it.
Okay.
So it could be next year and all of a sudden it just goes, or it could be in 20 years.
Does that worry you?
It would if I let it.
Good point.
I think because I've always had such problems with my eyes, I just kind of, what will be, will be. And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I could drive myself crazy thinking, is today the day I wake up with no eyesight? But when they do the surgery, they get one shot at it because the muscles are the same. So it's like cataract surgery.
Okay.
But they will get one chance to kind of put the lens in. So if it works, I should be able to technically then see with no glasses because that eye will accept it.
Right.
Because it accepts it now.
Yeah, because the brain's already trained with that eye. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I might see rainbows. I might see bunnies, but we don't know.
Oh my goodness. And obviously your vision's critical to a lot of things in life, but especially being a product designer, I'd like to think that's really important. Does that worry you about the future of your career? Even just if your vision diminishes, and you can still see, but not well enough.
I think probably that's why I'm subconsciously pushing so hard right now.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of factors into it. I want to provide for my family. I want to do well, and I want to kind of strike while the iron's hot. Mm-hmm. But also, I want to kind of if there's the opportunity there to set my future up before anything like this happens, it might never happen, but I might get hit by a car.
Absolutely. Anything can happen to anyone at any time. Yeah. But I suppose, so you're saying it's almost like a motivator to, you know, push your products along faster. Yeah.
Probably is.
Interesting how we look at things, and obviously like negatives can be turned into positives in terms of that. If you had the power to solve one problem in the world instantly, what would it be and why?
I would narrow it down to menstrual health.
Okay.
But I think the world is too big. So I think if I could do with a click of a finger, Thanos style, this is all taken care of. Free, unbiased, and perfect healthcare for everyone on the planet. Imagine what that would look like if it didn't matter how tall you were or how fat you were or what ethnicity you were. Every single person,
where in the world you were,
in the world, every single person got treated exactly the same, with the same respect and exactly what they needed within a day. So people would be so much better. There's a million things I could say I wish I could fix, but I think
it's interesting because we almost had that, didn't we, in this country alone? I know it's not the world, but it almost created more problems than it could handle for itself off the back of that. You know, if they solved, you know, perfect healthcare for people coming in, but eventually they got older and older, and then death's going to catch up with you one way or another. And it's almost like now they're a victim of their own success. So it's also interesting to see on the other side of that how that could turn things out. So it's just interesting, but that's a very good answer. Okay, so you mentioned you have a wife earlier in the conversation. How old were you when you realised you were gay?
I think subconsciously probably knew something was different from being about 7.
Okay. How do you mean different?
Not just different from what the other girls were doing, and not necessarily who you wanted to chase on the playground or anything like that, but probably more to do with I was very much a tomboy. Mama loved this, but for a while they called me Craig. I used to wear ties and stuff like that, so that probably comes down more
That's
to
kind of stylish.
Comes down to like identity rather than sexuality. But I think sometimes they're very much interlinked when you're that young. And then kind of not very much interest in boys for
sensible.
Stay away from them for ever really. I think I'd kind of pretend and try and trick myself into thinking a little bit to fit in. Robbie Williams and Take That. Clark Kent.
Okay, and was there no attraction? You were just like, oh, these seem like cool boys.
Yeah, they're cute, they're acceptable, but not thinking that, like, I'm not that devious.
Yes, of course.
Like, it's just kind of, we'll go with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think kind of going to art college opened up my world a little bit too. Coming from Peterlee, which is a very small town, didn't know any gay people, didn't know that was a thing. I think the only point of reference really was Little Britain, which is not what you want to be. And then so kind of...
What sort of era was this? Was it 90s?
So this will be... I went to art college in 2003.
2000, early 2000s, okay.
Yeah, so... growing up teenager through the 90s,
right?
And then not really a lot of, there's a bit more coming about men.
Yes.
Not much covering women.
Totally, yeah.
We got the L word, but was very like stylized, unattainable lifestyle.
It was almost like on trend to be gay as a man, but not as a woman.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that's the same today?
I think it is changing. Yeah. I think some of the like kind of famous people who are coming up now are making it much easier for the next generation. People like Chapel Roan and things like that, they are changing the world.
Yeah. Openly singing songs about a woman, about other women, which, you know, I think is so powerful because before you had to conceal that and still sing about men. I
mean, KD Lang was probably like the only point of reference, and that's not really, I mean, she's great, but it's not really cool. And it is mad now to think that from when I came out to singing a song on the radio about a girl on normal time telly, and it's not like, or a normal time radio, and it's not censored, it's not anything, and people aren't like Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl was so taboo, and it was just this kind of gimmicky thing.
Yes.
And it's not a gimmick anymore. It's just, this is people love people, and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people love people.
Yeah.
It's not hurting anyone, is it?
No.
Doesn't matter. So was it quite difficult to come out?
I think it was scary. It was a different time. Gay marriage wasn't legal, which is crazy to think about now. I know.
Just
I think for my parents, at the time, I didn't think they handled it well. But looking back on it, I understand now, and I understand that they were probably just scared for me and worried about what my future would be like. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't like chastised for it or anything like that. It was just kind of the thing, and then we didn't talk about it.
Okay. It's like, all right, dear.
Like, yeah, there you go. And then it was kind of, this is my friend, and kind of that era. But I think now that they've seen the world change, and that I have kind of, I own it. I don't make it a big deal. It's just part of me. I'm not pitchforking and shouting it in people's faces. It's not the first thing that comes out of my mouth. It's just, I am me. I think they're okay with it. They're not, but I know they're okay with it. They're not scared anymore, and I think they're really proud of me. They love my wife.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than me. And I don't think, I'd hope not, that they couldn't see it. They'd not sat thinking, oh, Zara's life would have been so much better if she'd married a man.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would have been living a lie, and it would have been gross.
And there's probably many people over the years who've had to live those lives because of the pressures from society or parents, family. Yeah. Which is really sad to think about it. So at least our generations, we can do what we want in that respect. But there still is bias that you face.
Oh, absolutely.
Is there any prejudice that you've faced in the past or even still today being a same-sex couple?
I think people aren't, the general population aren't as cool as they kind of made out to be in media. Right. It is better. And you have to kind of gauge where you are in life. We are very, I think, conscious and understanding of people's different beliefs and different opinions. So we don't force things upon people. And unfortunately, walking with your hands down Middlesbrough Town, holding hands down Middlesbrough Town Centre, for us doesn't feel safe. So we don't do it.
That's your hometown.
Yeah. So we don't do it. But that's fine. I'm not going home at night crying saying, I wish I could have held your hand. Like, we know that we need to protect ourselves, but we've never had any problems with neighbours. Whenever we talk to people, there is that, oh, your wife, and things like that. I think more so when I was a teaching assistant, I was very, very guarded, and I wouldn't talk about her, and it would just be kind of, I live alone. And I have a dog. But now, especially since we got married, it's much easier to talk about, and I'm super proud of it, and I'm super proud of her. She still has a little bit of, it's really funny because I think a lot of gay people take offence at it, but I don't think people mean it, because you wouldn't naturally do that. But because she works with a lot of old people, they'll say, oh, is your husband cooking your tea tonight? And you're not going to get into that conversation with a woman in a hospital bed. So she just goes, yeah, tonight, yeah. And they'll say like, oh, what does he do for a living? And so I turn into a man in a lot of people's stories, but I don't mind. It's sweet. And I don't think you should fight that fight in that moment. I think if someone walked up to me and was just like, you're a man, I would fight that.
Yeah,
and I very much fight for other people's injustice, but it's picking the right time, and what country you're in as well makes big difference.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I think I'd want to fight every battle, but maybe you just get sick of it, especially with the older generation. Yeah. I know someone who just can't tell their grandparents that they're gay. Yeah. They're just like, it's just honestly not worth it. They wouldn't understand. They'd probably get upset because it's just a whole other two other generations. Yeah.
It is really sad. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad that so many people kind of assume. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder if in 20 years' time that'll stop.
Yeah, it should
and
be.
people
like
be more, what does your partner do?
Yeah.
Which is happening more.
Yeah.
But I think especially when you're not, there's still that kind of, if you're feminine presenting, people will assume that you're straight, which is fair enough. I probably would. I find it very difficult to know who's gay and who's not.
Yeah, you're right. And I think a lot of people, they have really good intentions and a good heart, but sometimes they get the terminology wrong. Yeah. You mentioned the L word. Is that a word you prefer not to use? Do you prefer the term gay or?
No, sorry, the TV programmes.
The L word. Of course, yes, sorry. Yeah. But do you have any preferences on? Because there's so many different words and sometimes you don't know what's best to use.
I think when I did my speech at my wedding, my go-to is lesbian because he kind of don't say it. But being able to stand up and make a speech as a bride and a bride was really powerful. But I don't really think about it. I think lesbian's probably the best. I don't use queer because I think that now kind of covers other things.
Okay.
And I find like dyke quite visceral, but some people own that, and that's up to them.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's not for me.
Yeah, and then I struggle with the word queer just because, you know, if you look at literally in the dictionary, it's sometimes the other meaning is strange, and you know, I don't want anyone thinking that they're strange, but it's like you say, it's how someone owns it, and I'm happy to call someone anything that they want to that they're happy with. Yeah. Love it that you made a speech as well, Bride of the Bride. Yeah. I believe that it doesn't matter who or what you're marrying, women should have the right to speak, particularly at weddings, you know, as well. So quite a lot of my friends, they still don't. And I'm just like, please just do a speech, you know, just go be short. But yeah, we've fought for that. And it's still quite archaic, that whole element.
Well, we had a full female top table. So it was just our best women. And us at the top table. I did a speech and then we played bingo.
Awesome.
And I was the bingo caller and it was brilliant. I had the microphone. I was like, someone needs to take that away from me. This is too much power.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I've never heard of anyone playing bingo at the wedding.
Everyone loved it.
Amazing. If there's anyone listening to this podcast right now and they are wanting to come out but struggling, is there any advice you'd give them?
Do it in your own time. I think it's okay to not be okay with it, and you need to be right with it until anyone else is. I think you shouldn't change how you feel or how you say you feel because of other people's opinions. And if you don't feel safe, then don't. Find the safe space to do it. You're going to be okay, but time it to what is comfortable for you, not what you think society thinks you should do.
Okay, good advice. So timing's critical, like a lot of things in life.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Just before I ask the final question, you mentioned earlier about your height and how almost you don't almost face biases around your height, you know, being, as you say, 6 foot since 13?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Yeah, that must be tough.
It was, yeah. I was always the tallest at school. I was always the giant. Is the weather nice up there? Come on, get a new joke. And I was big. And I think it made me small. Or I made myself small to try and kind of fit in. I never really owned being, I think you can go up probably one of each way, You can either own it and be this massive big personality who bools into a room and takes over, or you can be very much, I'm here too, do I fit in this chair? Are we okay? And I was definitely the latter. I don't like to make a fuss. I don't like to kind of draw attention to myself. And I think it's had a big knock-on effect for style as well. It's really hard to find the right style when you're as tall as you are and you're a woman. So I ended up for a long time dressing like an old woman, and just kind of like the teaching assistant aesthetic, and to kind of go with that because it's safe and no one will bother you. So I'm trying to find my own style to fit who I am now and own being tall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a very handy thing to be as well.
Yeah, I see it as a powerful thing. Yeah.
Well, my mum's only 5'2", so it's very very unusual. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. I've always been envious of really tall people because I used to be really in sports and you naturally had an advantage, in most sports, not every sport. But yeah, it is interesting because I think, again, if you look at the gender stereotypes, you're almost seen as an outlier as a woman if you are particularly tall, whereas men struggle if they're particularly small.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting the challenges you face, and also that juxtaposition about the height made you feel small.
Yes.
Yeah. Really interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that with me as well. So my final question is, how do you hope to be remembered by the people who love you most?
Oh, I think being kind. I think everyone can be a dickhead every now and again, and people make mistakes and things like that. But I think I try really hard to make the right decisions and be a kind person and thoughtful. And I think that's really important to me. And also I have this weird stigma about not being classed as lazy.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but I don't want to ever be called lazy.
It's not something I'd like either, thinking about it. But yeah, have you dug deep into why that might be?
Oh, probably is. But I think, I don't know really. It's just probably held on to like teenage laziness and still think that I'm kind of at that point in my life. And I'm like, I'm not lazy. I just need a break. And kind of going with that. But yeah, definitely being kind.
That's lovely. It's just interesting, the laziness thing in a world that glorifies busyness. It's almost, you feel guilty if you ever do have a lazy moment. Well, I don't think I've had one, but it's not almost cool to admit if you do. But yeah, I have had them in my life many times, but just not recently.
I think definitely being self-employed has probably kind of brought that to the forefront. If I now don't have a proper structure and I can not work on a Tuesday if I don't want to work on a Tuesday, but I'm not being lazy, I'm just having my day off here instead of a Saturday. And you kind of have to balance that. And sometimes I work really late and I work better late. So then the daytime is like, let's keep going, but then you burn out and you think so. Yeah, definitely not having a proper routine affects how I feel about that.
Yeah, same for me too. And as we move on to our regular feature, the 1 to 10, we'll cover kindness first. We'll spice things up, seeing as you mentioned it already. You mentioned it's so important. That's how you want to be seen. What score would you give yourself at 1 to 10? 1 being the worst, 10 being the best?
At this moment in time, probably just 7.5.
Okay.
Yep.
Brilliant. I will save the next one for last. How good looking are you?
A 5.
Okay. How funny are you?
Oh, an 8.
Brilliant. How good at cooking are you?
If I don't burn it, a 7.
Okay. Right. How good at singing are you?
A 1. Terrible. In my head, I'm good, but to everyone else, no.
I don't think I've interviewed many really good singers. I'm hoping for a high score one day from someone. Based on your father's relationship with alcohol, do you drink alcohol?
I do, but I don't. Not really. I'm not bothered by it. It doesn't affect my life in any way.
Okay, and if you did, have you got quite good tolerance? Do you drink a lot?
No, I don't drink a lot. I've got good tolerance, but just not bothered by it. I'd rather not.
Yeah, I understand. What score would you give yourself if you had to?
Like, as in how good of a drinker I am?
Mm-hmm.
Probably a 7.
Okay. How good, and I don't believe you have any children, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
Do you have any
I've got
pets?
fur babies.
Fur babies, they're the best. Actually, no, my children are the best. Just to clarify, I don't prioritise my fur babies over my children, but fur babies are still pretty cool. And if people do, that's good too.
Probably an 8. I love my...
What have you got?
I've got a border terrier.
Did I know that?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know if I did.
Bella the border.
Amazing.
And Dudley the Labradoodle.
I knew there was a reason that, I felt a connection.
Yeah. She's 15 this year and Dudley's 9.
Oh,
She's chill, recently deaf, and he is insane. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Perfect partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hugo lost his hearing, probably about a similar age actually, and his sight towards the end. Poor little thing just bumped into cupboards in his last couple of years. But they're amazing. Did you give a score for that? Did you say an 8?
8, yeah.
Brilliant. How good a friend are you?
I think there's room for improvement for everyone. A 7, not be too hard on myself.
Okay. How intelligent are you, Zara?
If I've eaten... If I've eaten, a 7. If I've not eaten, a 2.
I love that. We've never had that one yet. It's usually all about the emotional intelligence, the different types of intelligence. But actually it makes a difference, doesn't it?
It really does.
When you think about it. Very good. And finally, how good at sex are you?
6.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Zara.
Thank you.